Alright, after an abortive start, my first video was me cussing about trying to set up. I had lost some of it's really hard to keep track of the units in this. They have a singular letter on them for which battles they're involved in. So this is involved in both Malplaquet and Oudenarde. I keep them in separate bags. One for one battle, one for the other, and one for the counters that are used in both battles. And after my cleanup from the last game, somehow or another I ended up with a bunch of the both battles ones in the bag that's not for this battle. The only stuff that's not for this battle. And that caused me no end of being upset. It felt very much like trying to set up Blenheim from the non-setup instructions. Actually, the instructions for this are pretty good, but it is a tedious task if you want to get each unit right. Luckily, there are some places where you can kind of fudge. First of all, the Allies, they give them by nationality, so they'll say something like 15 English battalions. Hey, that makes life easier. The French Cav, they just say set up in this many lines. That makes life fairly easy. The French infantry, however, is on a hex-by-hex basis. How important is that? Probably not terribly. Almost all of it looks exactly the same. It would be kind of neat if you could single out the couple special units, and it might be worth putting like a dot next to the few things that are really differentiable, but the problem there is there are a few special rules, which I largely ignore, having to do with stacking and overstacking of a single regiment together, and also firing of a regiment's together. So it does behoove you to have them all sorted ahead of time in their right regiments, for whatever reason. So this is the closest thing to a draw that Marlborough was involved in. He claimed victory, and so did Villars, the French opponent. Strong defensive position, although I do kind of question. You've got all these earthworks running through here, and these are unfinished earthworks. There's another layer back here on the other side of the woods. You do kind of question this earthwork coming to a big point. Defensively, certainly it gives you one hell of a field of fire, and it is the easiest route to what are going to be your victory locations, which are these. The English goal is to get, I think, 3 of these 5 or something like that. And they win automatically if they get that. We got breakpoints as well, and then some funky little rules to make this more historical or hysterical. There's some weird things with setup once you start looking at it. Among other things, you don't have enough commanders, and that's by design. The French commanders, some of them don't have their forces, well, the Allied too. This first one I noticed was Tilly here, who has a range of 4 on his command, and this is his line. He can't command that. So you're going to have a whole bunch of trouble to get his unit together and be able to do anything. You've also got artillery back here where it's not really in position to do anything to the French line. You can't fire over things except with those howitzers, and they're not in this one. Unless the rules have changed in Fields of Glory. I don't think I want to look that up. You got this little segment here, which isn't connected to anything else, sitting off in the woods out of command. You also have some French leaders who don't seem to be able to command the entire line that's under their orders. The French lines are less well distinguished because it's almost a contiguous line of troops, and they aren't defined as lines in the game. So if you wanted to use the fatigue rules, you'd have to define your lines prior to playing. I'm done with them. They're optional, and they created far more headache than they were worth. I don't think they added anything to the game for all the effort that they put in. They changed the game, and maybe in unintended ways. Directly by the morale changes that they imply, which says infantry's kind of not that good anymore. And then indirectly by making it much, much harder to keep your lines together because you have to physically define those lines, well, permanently define those lines. Otherwise, you wouldn't know which units are fatigued. And gods, I wouldn't want to keep a unit by unit fatigue record. Also, they give only 3 cav leaders for the French, but the French have 5 cavalry lines. And make do, man. That's pretty much the answer. Now, one of my cav lines is almost exclusively made up of dragoons, and I'm going to convert them to infantry as soon as possible. Historically, the cav didn't play much of a role for the French, and it's understandable. They're in a primarily defensive position. More infantry sounds better to me. Dragoon infantry is a little iffy. Not on its firepower so much, as it tends to have kind of crappy morale. It's better as cav, I guess, in terms of that. And it's actually the best cav you can have in the game in terms of the firepower it throws out. It's got essentially a better firepower from the carbines, equivalent to the muskets, which they certainly shouldn't be as bad as pistols, but... Alright, so we said there's some special rules here. Other than, gee, you only have 3 leaders for 5 lines. Figure it out, buddy. Well, you know, as long as you're not playing with predefined lines, you can run that leader over and take command of a different line, or combine lines, or whatever you need to do. So it's not really a big deal. There is a distinction, though. Cav and infantry leaders are distinguished by their limbs, and you can't switch them. So you got an infantry line leader, you're not going to use them for cav. And that works kind of nicely. Okay. We start off with a 9 o'clock bombardment as an option. Both sides have the option to... essentially, if you want to follow the historical, you drop your artillery limbs in for both sides. And it's not as exclusive as the others, because the English historically had been bombarding all for over a day, and they say 2 days or something. And he started his movement with one of Lotham's division. Where's Lotham? Right in here. Very early. We got more interesting stuff here. No, French deployed south-southwest of the stream, going from 3600 C24-114. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. There's a stream. These guys can't cross that stream unless they get a line of sight to an enemy unit. That's important because there's going to be an outflanking force under the command of Withers. That's this little segment here. These are just all the Allied dragoons. So I've got a lot of reserve infantry if I don't want to use cav charges and the like with them. I'm not sure which way, how I feel about that. These fortification lines, we should look at the terrain effects on them. So we have the unfinished fortification line, which isn't too impressive. And then we have the regular fortification line, which you can't even do a cav charge through. And you can see it has significant effects. For movement, unfinished, movement point allowances, the full fortification line, only infantry can cross it. Well, and leaders. Except, well, 1, there's some gaps in it. Like here, you'll see there's missing. And 2, there's places where there's these little arrows, which allow you, if you're on this side, to ride cav out. If things go really, really badly for the Allies, French cav can go out in pursuit through one of those hexes. They can't immediately charge or attack these hexes or something. They can't do a charge through them, so they got to kind of deploy. So you really have to kind of defeat the Allies for them to do you any good. The French army is pretty much hosed by this point in the war. largely it's taken huge casualties. Most battalions are less than 300 men. Nowhere near strength. So, well, what do you do about that? In the game, the decision was we make them less resilient. Instead of going reduced 1, reduced 2 dead, from reduced 1, if they take another hit, they die immediately. That's pretty big. It makes them capable of fighting a good fight, though, which is important, although the English somewhat disparaged the French capability here. It couldn't have been too bad, because they did hold on and dealt quite a bit of damage. This is claimed to be the biggest pre-Napoleonic battle in Europe. Not in the modern age, say, because I think some ancient battles were much, much larger. And then the second effect of that is that whenever you roll for a rally, you're going to add 1 to the French rally roll. Make it more likely that they're just going to fall apart. I've already talked about the Anglo victory. They have to grab 4 of those hexes, and there's, I think, only 5 of them. So they need a good control of the board. Breakpoint victories, 310 for the Anglo-Allied. That's what they have to lose. And the French have to lose 340 for the army to break. But, okay, here's where we get interesting. Starting with the 1500 turn, and that should be marked, the French can decide that they won and just declare victory. And end the game. However, in order to do this, you can't be aware of what the Anglo-Allied armies actually lost. So each side is going to probably be taking their own breakpoint numbers secretly in this, or at least the Anglo-Allied are. That's an interesting thought. I never considered that in terms of the other games. Is, well, gee, you know, I mean, if you know what the opponent's lost, you can figure out what you really have to do to win this battle. But if you only have a fuzzy idea, that could really affect the play significantly in these and great battles of history and likewise. It's kind of interesting to see that that's sort of thrown as an offhand comment here. Maybe that's the intended way to play these things so you have less knowledge. Anyway. So the Allies can't occupy any of the objective hexes in order to do this. And the French have to feel like he's winning in terms of casualties. At least 15% more losses. Well, if it turns out the Allies do not have 15% more losses, the Allies get to declare a victory. I think that means both people get to declare. Given the historical situation. Either way, it should start a nice argument, mirroring historical discussions over the last 280 years. So, yeah. And then otherwise, if we go completely to the end of the game, whoever has the least breakpoints will win. So that's an interesting idea. Why would the French want to withdraw if they thought maybe the Anglo-Allied army could do better over the course of it, or if they just really want to get out of there? So the historical result, I think, is a little unlikely, but it's kind of neat to have that option in there. And hey, if I'm really, you know, tired of this thing and it looks like a beast, there's a lot of stuff on this board and not a lot of room to do anything with all this woods. I mean, the armies are pretty big, maybe larger than anything I've seen. That's hard to tell given how they're deployed, because they're taking up more front than most of the games. But then again, it's on the up-down side instead of the across. So I don't know. The Anglo-Allied army doesn't look all that big. But the terrain is really, really hampering. You know what I forgot all about? I forgot about Mr. Withers. Okay, he's in here somewhere. Here we go. Okay, so Withers' detachment, the Allies get to pick one of 4 hexes that they want him to come in on. And then they draw a little chit to randomize 1 to 4. And based on the hex they get, there's an earliest turn of arrival. And those can be coming in, you know, on this outflanking maneuver. Now the line of sight is perhaps important because even though this hex is kind of nice, well, this one is kind of nice, but you can't spread out too far in there. Historically, they say this one's the one they went for, and actually the numbers are approximately equal for the 2, so maybe A is better. I'm not sure, because the spreading out capability, you know, being able to get a big force up in the woods, it's probably going to take about as much time with either one, and B looks a little quicker. Taking further back, you can come in even more quickly. But obviously, this is in a much worse position. You're going to have to maneuver through there. So I'll probably take a B pick and see what happens there. Whew. All right, that's enough initial. Oh, artillery. Yeah, we got a lot of guns. They're in weird places. Now, Field of Glory allows you to stack artillery, so there's like 2 guns in each of these spaces. Some of the guns are in weird places. You got French guns sticking out kind of in front of the line. I don't know how good those are, how well those are going to survive. I kind of would have liked them back in the entrenchments, but it's going to be tough to move them back there. There are some in the entrenchments. It's not like there's some feeling that the entrenchments can't hold them. But I don't want to go out and defend in front of the entrenchments, and I kind of don't want to lose my guns. They're my coolest thing. So we might. There's a good reason to see kind of an initial charge, I think, there. Remember, I think I can split my gun actions in this system. I think that's... It's still not made absolutely explicit, but I think I can choose to limber a gun and move it while firing other guns and such not. So I have a lot more capability. The artillery chip becomes a more valuable thing. And certainly on the defense, it's going to be useful. Okay. Okay, so all set up, ready to go. I threw the artillery limbs in. And you know what? Today I found myself a tripod on the side of the road. And I tried setting this up to see if it would work at all. Thinking, I'll make the sacrifice of, like, you know, wearing clothing and stuff like that while I vid. And, you know, I mean, it ends up, it's just fixed at one place looking at it. I mean, that's what a tripod does, right? I'm going to have to be running over and making little video checks and this, that, and the other. And it would be pretty much useless, which is why I never bought one, because I didn't think I could use one, but finding one on the side of the road seemed like too much to pass by. All right, so we'll see who gets first shot. I am going to do the full artillery barrage. Both people drop both their shits in at the beginning of the game. And what's kind of neat about that is it does allow the English to kind of move forward. Chances are they're not going to launch their attacks, but it's not like the full artillery barrages in some of the other games. So, well... I don't know whose this is. It looks like it's a British artillery. So everything's going to fire. And I'll come back after all the firings. First thing is, I thought this gun was totally useless, but it's actually not. The line of sight rules allow me to fire over my own unit, or over units at a lower elevation, as long as I'm firing up at a higher elevation, so I can pick out something to shoot at. What we're not going to see here is counter battery fire, because, and you almost never do in this game, I guess, because whenever I pick to fire something, if I pick a hex with artillery in it, the enemy artillery does get to fire back, and that gives them another shot that I wouldn't otherwise get. So I'll probably end up just picking infantry to try to disrupt. Now, this long-range counter-battery fire wouldn't have been helpful. I couldn't possibly get a hit that could affect the artillery. I was shooting over here, what with the defensive benefits, etc. What might work, though, is a massed fire against this, because I hit both units in the hex. There's 2 artillery there. Knocking that sucker out before my approach seems kind of a valuable option. So actually doing some counter battery fire and taking the extra fire back might actually make some sense in that case. In fact, that was the only effective fire hitting this. I might be able to actually destroy them permanently. That's going to be easier than swinging the cannons around to deal with something else. It might make up for the artillery fire turn. Any kind of fire from here, I already mentioned, it's going to be so low. I tried it, but we're outside maximum range. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 more hexes drops us down 2 columns, and then 2 for the defensive position. One of the worst column in the game. Over here, it's not a whole hell of a lot better. We're talking about one of these 2 columns. None of these have any D+ markers, which is the only way you get hits against artillery. So unless you've got close fire artillery versus artillery, you're not going to damage the enemy's artillery, and there's just not much value to pure counter battery fire, which of course means if you shoot at the enemy artillery, it's not going to be able to shoot back at you effectively anyway, because if you're out of range, he probably is at longer range too. The only exception being a couple of places where I've got guns stuck under fairly well defended positions. If you pick to shoot at those, you'll probably get a more effective shot coming back. You get the next shot, which lets them save these guys from a possibility of being knocked out with just 1 hit. And they also manage in some of the close range shots to get a couple of disorders. Not much though. At the end of the artillery phase, we see we got those. Got a lucky 2 hits on them. Actually off just one of the units, but I coordinated and wanted to fire them all simultaneously for the simple fact that that improves my chances of getting a hit before the counter battery fire takes place or whatever. So I don't know if you're supposed to declare fire, but it seems appropriate in the system. Otherwise, I couldn't have done much. I could have turned them to face these, which I probably should have been set up to do, just to try to suppress the artillery that's out in front anyway. This is probably just kind of a speed bump, though, if anything goes after it. It could drive some units away. Elsewhere, we got Allied unit routing through here, and not a lot else. Now we go to the no limbs phase, and you know what? I didn't really roll an initiative, but it's going to go to Marlborough. So he's going to get the first action over here, and we'll start seeing if he can get some of his units marching and actually attacking. I'm not sure how much an attack makes sense in Tilly's flank, because he's got this horrible situation where he's not in command of his units. He's going to have to tighten up that line and form it into something that he can actually command. He only has a range of 4, and this line stretches way beyond what he can do. So that's going to be kind of problematic. Of course, while he's doing some movement under the rules as I understand them now, he can actually do rallies at the same time, so that won't be too bad. I don't have to worry about fatigue. Yay. So, should start. I think I mentioned I've pulled a Withers chit or before I started to indicate what turn he's going to come in. I just put it on the game turn record track to remind me. I'm bringing him in the historical position again. It comes in earliest there, and it seems, or earlier there, and it seems like a fair choice. I'm not too worried about. There are actually rules to prevent the French from doing anything about it, so it's not really a big deal in terms of the overall strategy. It's not like it's going to be this big shock. The big shock's already in place. Starting the no limbs phase, I kick things off with Tilly, and you can see we get kind of a break in the line. I've got indications of where he was out of command, so that I can shift some of those forces, try to get them closer in to a single solid punch. But what I'm finding here, the French don't really want to do anything, so I'm taking passes on their rear line stuff, which I believe isn't allowed to move anyhow. But the English also, you know, taking a roll to see if Orkney can make it within 1 hex, or just moving them a little closer. It doesn't seem to make much difference to me at this point. One of the problems with this whole situation here is, man, there's this strong reluctance to go hit against those walls. because I know what infantry, faces, not just, grinding against each other. And when you're facing a 2-level bonus, that's like the villages. Oh, everywhere along the line, that is not pleasant, and I am scared to hit it. And here with Lotum, I take my first actual shot at rolling the dice to see if I can go in. I succeed, and I punch through, and I actually make it through the breastworks in one location. I had 3 lines of unit, or 3 spaces against 2. That gives you significant advantage in that, at least you're not going to fail right away. You get your full shot in finally. And I got kind of lucky, I think, by getting an auto route on this unit. Disordered, so I can't continue with shock through the woods. Shock through the woods, I think, gives a defensive bonus. Yeah, it gives a -1 shift had I been allowed to do that. But that's a lot better than the terrain effect. I think you only take into account the worst terrain. Otherwise, these barriers in the woods would be ridiculously potent, but they certainly wouldn't make sense. Any cover from the woods, that's a questionable thing, I think, for reasons that the gamers put forth. And I always kind of feel like, geez, if you're not in the woods, firing in the woods, it shouldn't make sense. Because nobody puts their line inside the woods. Especially in linear combat, you aren't going to do that. But even by Napoleonic era, and Civil War, there's almost no instances where they talk about people being a little inside the woods except for cover to hide from the enemy so that the enemy doesn't know that they're there. But actually engaging from that position, the woods themselves are going to so disrupt your fire that if you're going to put a penalty, it should be on both people. Really not a whole hell of a lot I want to do in the no limbs phase here. I mean, I'm looking, I just moved the English cav up a little bit. I failed to activate these. I want to swing them around in the woods a bit. It seems like that's one of the few places where I can get any purchase. You can see here the line goes all the way to the edge of the map. So at this point, I guess I'm just going to say nobody else is going to be doing no limbs commands, but I got some out of command units, particularly on the English side, that I want to try to, I don't know, consolidate the line or something. Tilly's command is just a mess, but there may be other commands that could use it. I think I've got a Valsh in good shape. I could probably try to send this cav through the gap too. Let's see if we can send that going somewhere. Nah, they're not going anywhere. Yeah, so mainly I'll be trying to line up Tilly's forces. I could do something similar with the French. I don't really feel up to it right now, but I've got a bunch of dragoons here. Unfortunately, I don't really have room to add them to any of the lines right now. Most of my lines are in pretty good shape. I may actually use them to shift over here, provide some more defense, because I know there's going to be a breakthrough over here. I know about that flanking movement. I just don't know quite what's going to happen. Within the game rules, I know Withers is coming in somewhere across here, and I know what that's going to hit. So my restrictions are on this side. I can get them shifted over, get some more infantry up there essentially, or cav if you wish. The problem with them is I can use Valier to command them right now, but I gotta kind of shift command as I go, unless I give up command of the unit that I'm positioned with. I don't know, I guess that's the end of the 9 a.m. turn. Not a lot happened because I don't have the limbs picked or whatever. I'm not sure what the French are going to do next turn. There's some desire for the double artillery pick, but on the other hand, Grimaldi here's got routing stuff. He's got a hole in his line he could try to fill. He's got some definite things that he could do, so we'll see what the CPs are. I started the points. Those guns got charged against the French there. And I got them up here. English got the initiative and opened up with some more artillery fire. Not much effect. I shifted these guns to try to counter battery this. I found a French gun here. I guess they were just setting up. They didn't get to fire during that initial phase. Oh no. That might have actually affected something. Then again, I might have actually been able to shoot that one. Well, it's behind the defense works, so unlikely. Then the French get a pick with this Gizbran. I thought it was Grimaldi, it's not. And I took him so that I could rally before I get hit some more and also bring units into command. My line's more segmented than it probably should be. Also shifted forces towards where the attack seems to be centering. French guns over on this side, including this newly found one, are causing a great deal of trouble for Lotham's line. Lotham's line. He's just getting enfiladed and crossfire. There's no modifier for crossfire in this, but it's going to make his advance much, much more difficult. He's got to break through into those woods and get out of that kind of killing zone. I've got the capability to maybe knock this gun out because it's in a stupid location. Either with artillery fire or maybe, I don't know, turn Orkney and march him towards it. But those guns that I thought were kind of silly, they're actually in pretty nasty positions where, yeah, they could fall if I make a direct assault into that area, but that's not exactly where I want to make my assault, right? I want to launch an attack here and maybe bring Tilly up that way, try to break the corner there. And likewise, here I want to break through in the woods. So they're kind of positioned in places where they're largely safe just because the line's so strong. Tilly slams in down in the south here. He also hits the connection here, basically. I'm losing part of my unit as I just keep moving away. I'll try to move him into range. Maybe we'll get a connection at some point or another. I'm leaving this one to join Orkney because I'm not using the fatigue rules. I can detach units kind of at will. You can see kind of mixed results here. We got routed, but there's holes in the French line. Those holes are these units. They were routed units that I was able to kind of pursue and then shock combat. So we had some pretty hefty results there. That's just regular French that are falling apart there. This would have happened without any special rules. But basically this is the weak point in the French line, but it's unfortified and the fortifications continue down here. So it's not really gaining me any kind of grip in terms of getting in the way that I'm hoping to around. Lotham's line here was next, and I changed the rules a little bit. So far I haven't been allowing changing of stacking when you're in front of somebody, but you know, honestly, the line replacement rule almost applies to that. The question is whether you should be allowed to do it. Here I did it in the midst of an assault, which I probably shouldn't have allowed. Anyway, we pushed forward and using actual close combat got into this hex too, but largely we're not making a lot of ground. You know, that defensive terrain is nice and it's breaking up the assault pretty nicely, even though I'm making some ground on some of the I don't know, it's almost like a bastion sticking out like that. I'm not gaining it everywhere. I'm trying to extend it into, say, here, and that's a hard job to do. Alright, and we finish up the limbs with Württemberg's cav pushing into the forest there. Yeah, that doesn't sound too reasonable, but whatever. These dragoons transferring over. I see Württemberg disappearing in the forest. That doesn't seem unreasonable at all now. And then Guiche here got an action. He just did a rally. I was kind of expecting maybe there'd be an attack, but you know, I knew he couldn't. Orkney's not close enough. Nothing was close enough to hit him. Now we go to the no limbs, see if anything exciting can happen during them. We're moving to 10 in the morning as, well, interesting situations here. French who haven't even been engaged. They took some artillery fire. We're a little disordered. Tried to rally, routed, just kept going. Other than that, though, we've got this guy withdrew. I think I can do that using out of command orders. That exchanges fire, but it gets him out of there. I don't know. No, actually, I did it using Frizzlera's command. He's sitting here. He's within range of this, so he did a withdrawal action. These guys did nothing because they aren't part of the line. This poor guy is stuck there, but here's the problem. Tilly's command is almost completely broken apart by this routing unit. He can still trace, including that, by my reading of the game. Anyway, a couple of routing English or Danish units actually there from the Anglo-Allied line, and some French points that we knew were dead. Another 11. That puts us to 15 over there, and that's about it. I should have mentioned, they got Lumley's Cav. They were kind of facing down this way. They've turned north. Just looking at the best chance for the Allies is this total outflank through those woods. I feel completely not like Marlborough here. We're going to see. But if this flank starts unrolling, well, then this is still a good, powerful area to launch the attacks from. And frankly, my cavalry is just not that good against the fortifications. It's not something I really want to do. If I could kind of do a carousel and then angle some infantry in at the same time and hit there, you know, that would work pretty well. But I'm just not seeing that as being a possibility. So it's up to the infantry to break through the lines, and if they do, it's going to be really hard for the cav to trickle in through one hex side, essentially, or one hex line, because you can't come back in through these cav exit spaces. I don't see too much use for them for the French either, to tell you the truth, some kind of sortie or something, just because, well, if they put themselves over here, they're pretty much dooming themselves, unless there's some massive counterattack going on all across the line, and I need my cav out more quickly, in which case, yes, it will help. Okay, and here Lodum's forces open things up. They're Marlborough's bonus for initiative. Punching forward, you can see some of them routed back, pushed away. However, they gained a little bit more ground, took out a gun over here. And, you know, they're still in the line, still firing. And we're going to see whoever, Schellenberg or whatever, cutting across and hitting from the other side. So that French position at the edge of the woods, that's in a lot of trouble. Coming in with mass troops is such an iffy thing in this game, because it's easier to shoot you, and therefore it's easier to disorder the top unit in the stack. And then they can't shock you, which is the only reason they've got the mass forces. Of course, in some cases, the frontage is so tight, etc. And this is one where Tilly came marching in, where there really wasn't much choice. In fact, in a sense, sort of this whole battlefield is so tight. It seems like a lot of room to maneuver in some places, like up here, but you know, where you're already set up and so close to the enemy units, when you declare an assault, you just got to go forward. You can't start spreading your troops out. And they got to go forward dense if they're dense, as far as I can see. Anyway, Tilly pretty much marched up here, and you can see he's done almost no damage to the French line. This was already disordered, whereas his own entire line's disrupted. Over here, a couple of units came in to fire at this. Now, this guy routed, but this guy's now so far out of control. He's never going to fight again unless, for some reason, the French make a choice to make an attack there, because with the out-of-command rolls, you just kind of hunker down where you are, out of range of the enemy, I guess. Kind of like these guys are. They've got this guy completely outnumbered, but they don't want to they don't have the ability to actually engage until I can link up Tilly's command again. And with these guys coming in, that's going to be tough, at least to keep everything together. Good old Valier here comes in with his dragoons, and I slice him across. I had him illegally stacked before, but now they're in a nice line, which they would have been in before. This brings an interesting question to mind. no matter how you play this out, what the hell do you do with dragoons in terms of the rules? And it's not clear. So once they dismount, they're now infantry. They can get back on their horses if they want. But Valiero's a cav commander, and I don't think he's allowed to command them. It might allow some kind of dispensation because they're all dragoons. If I do that, on the other hand, I was kind of intending to attach them to a line, but I'm having trouble with my commands, actually, and need more infantry. More wings of infantry, as it were. That's why I sent this here, and I'm not sure that I can get away with what I'm talking about. On the other hand, they are his command. It seems a little unreasonable that they should have to leave him as soon as they dismount. He's got some there's a problem though, because he's got some non-infantry in there. He's got at least one regular cav. Here it looks like two of them that I'm gonna have to attach to a cav line to make sense of anything. If I don't know. I really don't know. French artillery limb gets to go, and this is kind of a weird thing. If you don't command your artillery, it kind of only fires in defense. Some flanking fire, and we had some counter battery that got responded to. I've got the advantage with my entrenchments. And then over here, some close-in canister that you'd think would be going on no matter what, you know. Hell, nobody told us to do anything. Screw it. The only thing that really worked was some fire here. Actually, had a unit in front here, routed this, and broke up this formation some more. Alright, we finish up the limbs with the Germans under Schollenberg or whatever striking in here. Now what you can see the result of that, they're both disordered and the French held fine. We weren't able to hit any other units because of the 1 hex advance when you're assaulting. Pretty much across the line. Then over here, the guy who's not Grimaldi, Gisbron. No idea what the vowels in there that are missing are. So he did a move and rally type action to fill in some hexes, and he had a routing unit. This routing force is out of his command range, so he couldn't do anything about them yet. And now we go, I guess, to the no limbs. I think the Brits have initiative this time. Now we push to the 10:30 turn, and not a lot's changed. A little bit of shifting forces up in this direction, and then some rallies that went awry with much of the Prussians under Laudem being dissolved. Now the French that are routing back, and that's pretty much broken up most of that line. Means I'm probably going to have to pull back and try to form something up. Well, pull back is a weird situation. It might just mean I leave these guys here and start concentrating on rallying. Now, under the old system, I could rally all of that at once, calling it all one big command. As it stands, though, that's not going to be allowed. I can only rally 3 units per turn, because his command level is 3. The French weaker units are beginning to be a problem here, so we're going to have 12, 14 more points that the French lose, and that puts us to 29. Just a matter of, you know, they're more likely to disappear after they've been disordered, routed, etc., because they can only take one of these penalty markers. Oh, geez. I think I did not. I don't know if I moved it forward or not. God damn it. Oh, well, I guess I'll look on the video.